What's up, guys? Shawn Myszka from Explosive Edge Athletics in Edina, Minnesota, coming in regards to our 5th installment of our quick jump tips video series that we got rolling here. Now, if you missed 1 through 4, please go check those out, because as you're going to see, these things are starting to build on top of each other one at a time. So I'm starting to break out more of this animal for you as it starts to really try to see how we can increase our working effect of our entire jump movements and in any jump performance task that we need to have. Just a quick recap. In jump video tip number 1, we talked in regards to foot position and foot placement to ensure that we didn't have any energy leakage. In jump video number 2, we talked in regards to the knees and developing or finding the proper knee angle in regards to your specific strengths and weaknesses. In number 3, we moved right up the chain and started to talk about having proper hip flexion and hip hinge, and trying to see how that was going to contribute to the overall jump performance. In number 4, we talked about a quick way that we can increase jump performance by increasing or finding and optimizing the right eccentric velocity. And today's is going to build off of that jump velocity a little bit more. Now, to give you a little more in-depth recap in regards to jump tip video number 4, and I was talking in regards to the simplest way for us to increase concentric velocity, because we know that jump height is going to be a result of what kind of velocity we have of the center of mass at the moment of takeoff on the concentric action. But our quickest, and in most of the times, our quickest way to increase that concentric velocity is to increase eccentric velocity. But that is not always the case, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to try to give you some ways today on why we might need to, or how we might need to address that issue. Now, why isn't it always going to be the case that how fast you go down will determine how fast you go up, or how much energy you absorb will be how much energy you exert? Well, it's because of this. The increased eccentric velocity will really do no good if we can't stabilize and withstand that extra force that comes with that rapid or increased rate of stretching at the bottom position of our counter movement. Meaning that if I was to do a counter movement and I was going to look at my eccentric action, and the stretching and yielding phase is going to be from here to there. Now, if I can't stabilize and withstand when I'm down in this position right here, that eccentric velocity that we used will be wasted. We'll have a lot of energy leakage. Our amortization or transition time between downward and upward will be increased, and will release a lot of the elastic energy that we were trying to build up and allow us to contribute. There's a couple different reasons why this occurs. Reason number 1 is sometimes people spend way too much time doing slow yielding eccentric motions, specifically when they're squatting or those types of movements, or just start jumping slow, or they have always been jumping slow, and then it becomes very foreign to them when they increase the velocity. So they might not have the lower body capabilities and strength or power or elastic energy utilization through their entire lower body, quads, hamstrings, glutes, etc., and the accompanying tendons that go along with those muscle groups as well. There's another way that sometimes people have that energy leakage down at the bottom, and that's if they have a weak core. Oftentimes we see people taking the approach towards developing their core musculature through doing things such as movements on their back, exercises on their back, sit-ups, crunches, the like. People also oftentimes will add machines, thinking that it's going to have a carryover, where their feet are elevated and they're just crunching down on a machine that has variable resistance. Another way that we see it is with isometric type movements. Isometric such as planks or side plank holds, those types of things. Now, I'm not saying that those types of core movements aren't good, but what I am saying is that, in my experience, that they are really mostly going to have the most amount of effectiveness for individuals who are either beginners or only moderately trained. As athletes start to move up that spectrum of level of sports mastery, we're going to see the need for more specificity. So as an athlete progresses up a level of sports mastery, especially in regards to jump-specific movements, we're going to realize that the movements that they do, even to something like the core, needs to have more dynamic correspondence. Therefore, we need to be on our feet. So I'm going to give you a couple exercises today, not only for the anterior side, so for the abdominals, but also the posterior, which would be that erector spinae of that lower back. and some carryover also down into the lower body here as well when we look at the first movement. The two movements that I'm going to address today are definitely not all we can look at when we look at the toolbox, but they're two very underused exercises, at least in my experience, especially this first one. The first one that I'm going to do is going to be the good morning exercise. Now, many of you have probably heard of a good morning or seen people doing a good morning, but I don't think it's done enough. In my experience, when people start to incorporate good mornings into their training programs, especially when they haven't used it before, they will immediately see an increase. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do the good morning, I'm going to give you a few recommendations, and then we're going to move on to the next exercise. Now, when I do this exercise, you're going to notice that typically people will recommend that you keep a stiffer or straighter leg and not have a lot of knee flexion. I disagree. Of course, as you're probably seeing with the trend with some of these videos, is I like to make the movement as specific as possible so we have as much carryover and enough transfer to have true dynamic correspondence. Now, we can't ever do that completely with a weight training movement, but we're going to try to get close with most of our movements. So what we're going to find with this is that first off, I want to give the disclaimer, you don't want to use too much weight with this exercise. Okay, you'd rather have a weight that you can move and handle safely, especially because it's going to be weight bearing and you're going to be putting a load out in front of you. So I'm just going to execute a few reps here, and then I'll go ahead and explain exactly what I was after. Alright, notice I hit a couple of reps there, probably a little different than what you've seen before. What I do in the movement and what I instruct my athletes in most cases, especially if our emphasis is going to be in increasing counter movement jump height, is going to be hinge at the hip first, like we talked about in one of our previous videos, and then also attain a little greater knee flexion than you would usually have recommended. Now, of course, you probably heard me breathing in there, and obviously breathing is going to have a little impact here. And I will start to address breathing in later videos, so go ahead and hold that thought as far as what breathing we need to have to increase our strength production or our performance production in regards to a jump specific type movement. But just with this exercise, if you want to do this and you've never done this exercise before, I would definitely recommend this exercise over something like a Romanian deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift. I even like it as much as I do like 2-leg hypers or a 1-leg hyper type movement. I think because we're ground-based, it's going to have a lot more carryover because the direction of force is going to be in the same way that it's going to occur out in a vertical jump. As far as recommendations with this exercise are concerned, again, load, we want to keep it fairly light. This is a pretty light load for me. Obviously, I'm doing it without a warm-up. But we can get fairly heavy with this. We just have to be careful, not only from a stability standpoint down in that bottom position, but also in regards to making sure that our transition from downward to upward there still has a decent rate of force development, even though this exercise typically won't be touted as an explosive movement by means. Okay, but we want to have as much velocity carryover there as possible. Not that that would ever replicate. Okay, so don't misconstrue that. What we're going to find here with this exercise, though, is that it'll give us greater stability when we're down in this bottom position. It's going to kind of replicate that same position that we're going to be in the bottom of our counter movement jump. And we're also going to have a little enhancement here from a trunk or back extension on the concentric action, meaning on the upward face. Okay? Now to flip around, that was obviously for the posterior, the rectus spinae of that low back. We're going to move to the anterior side here and hit the abdominals. Now, this is going to be very simple through a ground-based movement with the use of a jump stretch band. Now this is a moderate type jump stretch band. You can get these again if you missed one of my earlier videos. You can get these jump stretch or Woody bands. There's a number of different styles out there. But this is going to help us a lot, especially when we look to increasing the velocity that we can attain on that eccentric, on that counter movement. So all I do is attach this to a rack. Of course, it's pretty easy to find somewhere to have this attachment. And then we're just going to find a good amount of tension, and we're going to start the movement from where my hips would be hinged back and my knees would have greater flexion. So I'm going to have a little bit of tension there in the band, and then I'm simply going to breathe and execute a couple reps. Okay, now with that exercise, you're also going to notice that we don't want to use too heavy a band to where we can't attain a pretty decent velocity. Notice that with the abdominal region, when we're in our counter movement, our whole body is going to be going through its eccentric phase, okay? Or the jump phase is going to be looking at from a withstanding or a yielding standpoint. However, the abdominal region is actually shortening and contracting. So it can help increase the velocity that we can attain on the downward motion. And of course, if we can get our body used to doing that, we're going to attain more velocity on the downward and then hopefully more on the upward. As long as, again, by using these two exercises and exercises like it, we can learn to stabilize and withstand greater force down at that bottom, and we can use it to transfer into greater concentric power production. Now with this exercise, it seems like a very simple exercise, has a lot of effectiveness to it. Okay, we can still keep the reps about in that 8 to 10 range. One thing I forgot to mention with the good morning is I like to keep reps a little lower. We like to do anywhere from probably 2 to say 4 sets of the good mornings here. And we don't like to get above 8 reps. So we'll do anywhere from 4 to 8 reps with that good morning. With this standing band crunch type movement, we'll do about up to 10 reps. Again, about 3 sets. And we like to increase speed in any movement before we look towards increasing resistance. So we're looking at increasing posture, balance, stability, flexibility, those types of things, then speed, and then resistance, okay? And I think that's important. This ab exercise, the standing band crunch here, will help us get greater control, especially on that downward motion. It will help us keep our trunk in a proper position to exert force when we get down in the bottom. And then, like I had earlier mentioned, it can help increase the concentric velocity that we can bring to the downward motion, and then therefore that's essentially will equate to greater eccentric phase velocity of the whole jump action. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it can be slightly confusing. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to post on as far as comments are concerned. I'll do my best to address them. And you're going to see more and more of this stuff coming together. So it's kind of like a big puzzle with pieces everywhere. I'm trying to pull and give and put together here for you to help give you things that you can immediately do to increase jump performance. For jump video tip number 5, Shawn Myszka from Explosive Edge Athletics in Edina, Minnesota. We'll see you again next time.